Okay, so let me share my screen. Oh, what's going on here? I think my laptop is disconnecting, so I have to connect it back. So I hope you can hear me, right?
Yes, sir. I can.
Okay, so I'm going to share my screen once again. Uh, Share the entire screen, and here we are. I don't know why this is not showing the internet, so let it not go and disconnect like yesterday. Okay, so this is what we have. This is what we did yesterday where we stopped. And yesterday we after a brief explanation of some basic uh, validation in HTML form, I talked about HTML elements where I made mention of block level elements that takes full width of the browser, and I also talked about inline level elements. And here are the things that I explained yesterday. Three things that make up HTML elements, which is open tag. Yes,
Sir, sir, the screen is not showing.
is
It's not
your
showing me good in Max Tech.
is your network.
Okay, yeah, it's showing now.
Please make sure that you have a good internet connection. And when I'm explaining, just pay attention, you understand it, then later you have question you ask. Is that okay? Hello, are you with me?
Yes, sir.
So I was talking about the three things that makes up HTML elements: the open tag, the tag content or the element content, and the close tag. And here it is explained using H2 elements. And then I talked about the types of elements in HTML: block level and inline level. Now also used I introduced you to a resource material which is w3schools.com, where you can read a little bit. Like I said from the beginning of this training, that W3 School is not only source of information when it comes to web development, but you can reference it. I don't know what's wrong with the internet this night. Internet is not stable, so you can reference W3 School just for more information. But as we continue, I'm going to be sharing more resource materials with you. So very quickly,
Yes, sir.
again today I'm going to take off most of these things on the screen because it's getting clustered already. It's getting messy. So I'm going to take out this form, and in fact let me take out everything here, leaving only the down part. So you have already gotten a basic understanding of the HTML elements. Now, some of the examples of HTML elements that I gave, because yesterday I gave you some screenshots. I gave you some screenshots to study, and some of those elements, like you earlier mentioned, are the div elements. The div element is a block level element. I'm just going to explain this a little bit because you made mention of it. Div element is a kind of container, all right? It's a kind of container that we use to arrange other elements in on a web page. So as we continue, by the time you start working on project, you realize that you need containers in order to arrange your content on a web page. I hope you understand what I'm saying.
Yes, sir.
Very good. So now, very quickly, let's go to the topic of today, which is HTML attributes. HTML attributes. I usually write so that you can understand. Sorry, HTML5 attributes. So the big question that you need to answer is, what is HTML attributes? That's just the question. What is HTML attributes? And in a nutshell, I can tell you that HTML attributes are additional information that is added to an HTML element. You already know that HTML element is basically made up of three. Sorry, thing is not going back. The HTML element is basically made up of three things: the open tag, the tag contents, and the closing tag. Just um, as you can see, let me just put an H2. So this is what we call HTML element: the open, content, and close. So additional information that can be added to these elements that will serve different purposes is what we call HTML attributes. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
So, going to your search engine, you quickly make a search for HTML attributes. It said it provides additional information about HTML elements. All right. So, what are those additional information? And why is HTML attribute very necessary? That I'm going to take time to explain. We may not exhaust everything in this in our class today, but as much as we can cover, we'll continue later on. So when we now want to list HTML attributes, we have so many of them. But before I list them, you should note that HTML attributes is specified or is added, sorry, it is specified in the open tag. So you don't just put your attribute anywhere in an element. You have to specify it in a particular place for it to serve the purpose for which it is meant to serve. Do you understand? So if I want to add an attribute to this element, I must add it to the first, the open tag, and not in the close tag, and not in the content. So I have to create a space like this, and from here, I will now specify my attributes. So let's take, for instance, something that we did yesterday. Yes, I think that, yeah, that was yesterday. I did something to show you that block level element takes full width of a page, and inline element takes only the space required for the content. So if I put here style, and that is exactly what we used yesterday. And I put background color, which is exactly what we used yesterday. And I put any color at all, and I put this. So you see, I have applied background color to this element. This additional information that I added here is known as attributes. It's known as what?
Attributes.
Very good. And that's why we say attributes provides additional information to an element. Now, and also remember that I said attributes have different purposes. So the attribute that I use right now to add this color is different from an attribute that I may use maybe to how do I put it? Okay, an attribute that I may use maybe to in order to style this specifically in an external CSS file. So I'm going to be running through some of the attributes, and later on I'll drop the video to you, or maybe probably I don't think I'll be able to access the video now, but if I can access the video now, like I did yesterday, I'm going to drop a video that you watch after this class in order to get more information on HTML attributes. Now, this type of attribute that I've used is known as style attributes. You see it here. This one in red color, style attributes. That is the name of the attributes. We also have an attribute called, let me get rid of this one. We have attribute called class. Class is an attribute. Let me just list them here. HTML attributes, we have style. Don't mind me. Oh. We have style, we have class, we have ID. What else? What else? What else? There are so many of them. There are so many HTML attributes that we can talk about. But when I give you the video, you are going to take your time and then understand them and see how they work. While for the meantime, I focus on how to use HTML attributes, when to use them, and I'll pick some of them and then I'll try to explain them in such a way that you'll be able to understand. So let me now go straight to why attributes are necessary when you are working on an HTML project. Why are they necessary? Number one is that you may have multiple elements like this. You see all these elements? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So these are elements of the same type. These are all H2 elements. And maybe in those style sheets where you want to style them, you don't want all of them to have the same style. For instance, if I call H2, don't worry about this, I will explain it later on. And I put color, maybe this color I put blue, automatically all these elements, they are going to grab the blue color. Why? Because the selector here is H2 and all the elements are in H2. All right.
Yes, sir.
But there is an alternative. If I can decide, okay, fine, I don't want to use this type of styling because if I do that, it's going to turn all the elements. I mean, the styling I'm going to apply here will affect all the elements, and I don't want that. I want each of them to have their individual colors. So for that, I can decide, okay, fine, I would rather resort back to the style attribute. The style attribute, I can put this here, specify my color, and then I give the first one a brown color. And you see that this one will take a brown color. So I can decide to take these style attributes and apply individually to all these elements. Well, that would work fine, right? That will work fine because if I change this color here, this is going to change. If I change this one also, uh, it's also going to change. But the but there is, at the end of the day, I'm going to have a very complex code. My code is not going to be neat. It's not going to be organized because I have a lot and a lot of information embedded in it. Do you understand? So, for us to have a neat code and for us to have not only neat, well organized code that is easily understandable and you can easily read through the lines of code, we need to make our HTML code snippets as simple as possible. That automatically means that using the style attributes to style your elements when there are so many is not an option. Okay, if that's not an option and we need to solve this problem, I don't want all of them to be this blue color, then I can decide, okay, fine, let me use class attributes. This class attribute, what it does is it helps us to give a name to the element. Then if we want to style that element, we can then style the element using the name. Okay, maybe I'll call this one heading 1. I'll call it heading 1, and if I come over here, I put dots heading 1, then you will see that, oh, fine, only the first heading is now blue. Why? Because I gave it a class attribute with a class name, and my selector now is the class name. That's fine. So whatever that I apply as a style to this class name is only affecting this first element. And that's why here you have blue. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
So with this, yes, we still have additional information to the element, but it's not as complicated as using the style attribute. I hope you agree with me on that.
Yes.
So it is still way more neater and more organized than what we had before. Now let me take a little time to describe what this class is. Like I've said already, class is used to give a unique identity to an element, a unique identity which is class name. So every class has a name and you can use that name to assess the element on which the class has been assigned. All right.
Yes.
But then um, there is another attribute that I mentioned here. I think I have it here. Yes, which is ID attributes. The ID attribute is another attribute that we can use to assign a unique identity to an element. So I'm going to call this also heading, let me call this heading 1. Okay, I give them the same name, class name heading 1, ID heading 1, but this ID is on the second element. Let me give it a little space. This second element, heading 1 ID. This is first element, class name, heading 1. So in as much as I can use this class to assign unique ID, unique name that will represent this element for me to style it, and also I can use it in JavaScript to access this element. I can also use this ID to apply a unique identity. But there is a order of hierarchy. Order of hierarchy here, meaning that there is one that supersedes the other one, and that's the reason why I'm giving it the same name, because I want to experiment that. So I want to select this second element and I apply the same color to it, and let's see. uh, let's see what is going to happen. Here I have hash heading 1. I know you'll be wondering, why do I use hash? I use dot. I mean, what are they doing there? Why can't I just put in the either the ID name or the class name, and then we'll go straight to the point? But there is a reason why it is like that. So to this, I'm going to apply class again, and I'll put this here. So, all right. I'm going to change this one to, I'm going to change this to red, and then, okay. Hope you can see the screen, right?
Yes, sir.
Now, I applied two attributes here, the heading, the ID attribute and the class attribute. What I want to show you here is that anywhere you have ID and the class, the ID takes precedence. Uh, it takes the lead. All right, let me just use the word, it is stronger than class. ID is a unique identifier, class is a representation. So what that means is you can apply the same class name across multiple elements, but it will be wrong. It will not be, it will not all go well if you apply the same ID name to multiple elements, because ID is meant to uniquely identify, and semantically it has precedence over classes. Do you understand? So there are so many other functions of this ID that I'm going to talk to you about later, but for now, this is a little explanation that I can give. So looking at the colors that I've applied here, to tell you that okay, class is lower than ID, or ID have power over class, I apply the same name here, class heading 1, ID heading 1, and I apply different colors. I have color red here. Hey, young man, are you hearing me?
Yes, sir.
Make sure you're paying attention. So here I have on the class section color red, on the head ID section color blue. So supposedly, normally, this is what you're supposed to have. You're supposed to have something like this. You're supposed to have the both of them to be red. All right, because they are having the same class name, and I am applying color red to it. But because I have added an ID with the same name and different style, This ID here is overriding this color. It's pretty simple. So that's just the only thing I want to show you here. IDs are more stronger, or they dominate the classes. And now, let me zoom in a little bit. Here you have dots before the class name. So anytime you in your CSS you want to select a class name, the before the name there must be a full stop. There must be a dot. This dot here tells the code editor, it tells the HTML, it tells the browser that okay, you want to select a CSS class, an element CSS class. That is why you have to specify this. But if you are selecting an ID, you have to start with this pound sign, hash symbol before you put the name. So if peradventure uh, maybe I didn't include this hash sign, if I remove this and I remove these dots, you see that none of these styles will be applied to our element. Why? Because at this point the browser doesn't understand what I'm trying to do here. This is just heading one, just like name, you understand? So it doesn't really make sense to the browser and to the code editor. But once I include dots, and I remember, okay, this is a class name and you want this color to be applied to it. And right here, if I include hash sign, you now remember, oh, when I apply the hash sign, you now remember, okay, this is an ID, and then it goes ahead to apply the styles that you have specified.
Yes, sir, that's their main signs that
Sorry?
those are their main signs that they go by. Class goes by just and ID goes by hash.
Yes, that's it.
So all of the attributes have different signs behind them or just those.
No, 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 no. This is just unique to the ID and the class attributes. There are so many other attributes that you are going to study on your own, and yes, when you study them, you just have to. This is like this because we use it to style our elements. Are we together?
Yes, sir.
All right. So, you have any question you ask before I go on to another thing?
Style does not have any sign. That's just how it is.
Yeah, the next thing I want to talk about will address that issue.
Okay.
All right. So let me now quickly introduce another topic, which is HTML, CSS. You know, before, when we started, we said that. Can you just mute that thing that is making sound? Your system is. I'm hearing your voice. I mean, I'm hearing my voice.
Yeah, hear your voice.
Mute your laptop.
I've already off mute all the I don't.
So what I'm saying is that when we started, we said that HTML is only used for structuring. So it used to structure the web page or the website or the web application. But then if you want it to look beautiful, you start using the CSS to make it look neat. So what I'm about to introduce to you now is how to connect HTML and CSS together, or how to use HTML and CSS together. Let's take for instance, I come to our folder here, I make a new file and I call it styles.css. So in the styles.css, in this file, I'm going to write my code for styling the page, but the HTML which you are seeing on the browser is in the HTML file. Like I did before, I can come over here and say, okay, dot heading one. Please look at the screen. So we say dot heading one, and then I put the color, and then I will apply blue color to this. So I'm supposed, okay, let me add the class name here. So as I've added this class, and in the CSS file, I apply this style. I am supposed to have, the text here is supposed to change to blue, but it is not working. Before, what I did is I applied the same style here, heading one, and I put color. So if I put this one here, you see that it's going to show me blue. But what if I don't want this code to be here? I want only HTML. I don't need anything that will make my code to be so scattered or disorganized. So for that, I want to separate my HTML from CSS. So I need first to establish a connection between these two files, the CSS and the HTML. I need to establish a connection between the both of them. And for I'm turning off my sound because I keep hearing my voice, and you're telling me that I don't know what you're saying. So if you speak henceforth, I'm not going to hear you. Otherwise, you turn off your loudspeaker. So I was saying that for this my style that I have in the CSS to reflect on the page, I need to establish a relationship between the CSS file and the HTML file. And that is done in this head section where I told you that we have meta information and other informations that are not visible on the web page. So under this title elements, I'm going to add link. So when I click on link CSS, you see it will generate this line of code: link rel style sheets href styles.css. So this name here must correspond to the name that I gave to my CSS file. So I'm going to add s here to make it styles.css. And when I do that, you will see that already my style on this file is already showing on the screen. This method of connecting HTML and CSS together is known as external CSS. This is known as external
Yes, sir.
CSS. Why? Because where I wrote my CSS code is separate from where I have my HTML code. All right. Another way of connecting HTML and CSS is internal CSS. This internal CSS is a situation. Let me keep this aside so that you see. So this internal CSS is a situation whereby I use the style elements in my HTML, and that's what we have been doing since. In between these style elements, I now add my CSS. So when I do this, I am using internal CSS. So both the HTML and the CSS, they are all in the same file. This is what we call internal CSS. But when I write it separate like this, it's called external CSS. And when you finish writing it like this, I showed you how to connect the CSS and the HTML file. Later on, before I end this class, I will explain this better to your understanding. So I hope these two explanation now is clear how to use external CSS and internal CSS.
Yes, sir.
Now we have the third one, which is inline CSS. Now this inline CSS is what is known as the what is it called? The style attributes. So if you want to use inline CSS, it means that you want to use style attribute. I put style here and I will apply color, and then I can use any color of my choice. This here is an inline CSS. So I can specify any CSS property that I want. I can add them there and they will reflect on the page. So this is an inline CSS when you are using the style attributes. You understand?
Yes, sir.
But when you are using uh, a separate file for a CSS is called external. When you are using the style elements where you write your CSS in between is called internal. I think my explanation is very straight to the point.
Yes, sir.
Oh, I'm having low battery. Okay. So at this point, what do I let me come and explain this again, maybe for the last time, and then let me break down what made up this link. Now, this is a link element that is used to allow the HTML and the CSS to communicate. Rel stands for relationship. This specify what the kind of file that you want to establish a relationship with the HTML. So here we call it style sheet. This href is hyperlink reference, and this points to the file name where whatever code you want to connect with the HTML is written, and that's why we put the name of the CSS file. So it is as simple as that. If this name does not correspond, then the code that is inside is not going to reflect, and you see it showing right here. So basically that is what it is when we talk about HTML attributes. It provides additional information to our elements when we talk about CSS. I've showed you the three ways you can use CSS with your HTML. I think at this point you've got a lot of information to process, and like I said before, I'm going to be giving you the tutorial to follow immediately after this class. If you have any question, you can go ahead to ask.
So, sir, the I just want to confirm the style CSS is the file. The name must always correspond to connect to
I can't hear you, speak up.
the style CSS is after after the hyperlink reference file that we need to connect to the CSS.
This is the CSS file name. This one, you can see it up here. That's the file name. So if you change this name to something else, then you must as well change this name. This one must correspond to the source where that CSS file is located.
There's the style sheet is under the reference, which is like the relationship.
Oh, sorry, I just got my screen. Let me share this once again. So the style sheet here that you are seeing represents CSS, telling the HTML that okay, the relationship is being established between HTML and style sheets, which is CSS. Because CSS actually stands for cascading style sheets. Cascading style sheets. The first S style, the second S sheet. Is that understood now?
Yes, sir.
Any other question?